Let me bring on now, as she stated, he is on intelligence. He has certainly been committed to social justice. He is certainly one that has regarded and respected the civil rights community. Let us welcome Senator Mark Warner.
Good morning. Let me first of all thank Reverend Al for allowing me to come here this morning. He and I go back a long way. We first started working together when I took on what folk thought was a little bit of a fool's errand. But way back in 1989, I joined and then became campaign manager for a then young man named Doug Wilder.
That's right.
That became the first African-American governor elected in his own right in our nation. And even as far back as 1989, Reverend Al was in the fight. I know we've got Mr. Clyburn, Representative Green here, but I want to also make a comment about Senator Harris. You know, we saw her in the Judiciary Committee hearings. Many of us saw her when she took on then Attorney General Sessions in our Intelligence Committee hearings.
Right.
Or when she took on the questions around Jim Comey in our Intelligence Committee hearings. What you don't see, and what I get a chance to see on a regular basis, is the amount of hard work, energy, and commitment she puts in, because on the Intelligence Committee, 90% of what we do is behind closed doors. But behind those closed doors, hers is a voice, even though she's a new member, that is listened to by people on both sides of the aisle and brings an enormous power and intellect to these issues. Now, I was thinking about coming in here this morning, going through a series of pieces of legislation that would be part of this network's agenda. But I want to take a moment and maybe step back and talk about what I think is an even bigger issue. Now, for those of you who don't know my background, and I'll make this brief, before I was in politics, before I was senator, before I was governor, I was a business guy. Remember being a couple years out of law school, took my life savings, I decided to become an entrepreneur. Life savings, $5,000. Invested it in a little energy startup company. Went to work for that company, and in 6 weeks, I helped that company go totally bankrupt. I then went into real estate, moved to Atlanta, spent 6 months on that, and failed at that as well. But I never took out those bankruptcy charges. Third time, though. 1982, I'm living out of my car, sleeping on my friends' couches, and I got a third shot. I fell into the very early days of the cellular telephone industry. Still remember all my law school classmates saying to me, "Warner, go get a real job. Who's going to want a car telephone?" They're still practicing law. But I was incredibly blessed. But I also realized that in America, I'm not sure that every American gets 3 shots. If I had not been a white man with the appropriate education, I probably wouldn't have got that third shot. I might not have gotten that second shot. I might not have even had a first shot. And as somebody who has benefited as much as I have from this system, I've benefited beyond my wildest imagination. But I stand before you today in 2018 and would argue, and even though I've been the beneficiary of this system, that modern American capitalism is not working for enough people. And what we ought to be talking about, and what the network's agenda ought to be, beyond specific pieces of legislation, is a forward-leaning theory of the case, how in America in the 21st century, every American gets an opportunity to earn a good life. Not be given a good life, but to earn a good life. because there are three issues I think that undermine that opportunity right now. Right now in America today, there is more economic inequality and income inequality at a greater level than any time in our American history, except for about 1928, right before the Great Depression came. Today in America, and Kamala made mention of this, half of Americans are $400 away of an unexpected bill for going into bankruptcy. And we have in this nation enormous amounts of economic insecurity. My dad never made a lot of money. He went to work for the same company, 38 years he worked for that company. But with that job came a certain level of security. With that job came health care, retirement, and if he were to lose that job, there was unemployment, workman's comp, disability. That world doesn't exist today. So we have income inequality, we have income insecurity, and we also have an enormous disparity in terms of equality of opportunity, in terms of where you live or what you look like in America. Matter of fact, out of the over 3,400 counties in America, about 2,200 of those counties in the last 10 years have lost jobs and lost businesses. If you look at the statistic, 90% of all new jobs in America, they're not coming from the big old-fashioned corporations, they're coming from startups. But if we're going to make sure everybody in America has that opportunity to earn a good life, that is not going to work when 90% of all venture capital goes to only 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts. Wow. That is not going to work when less than 10% of all venture capital goes to women. That is not going to work in terms of America where everybody gets an opportunity when less than 2% of venture capital, early stage funding, goes to African Americans or Latinos. So let me, in my couple of moments here, lay out what I think ought to be our agenda. An agenda that doesn't look backwards, an agenda that doesn't seem to be wistful for the good old days, but recognizes that the rate of technology, the rate of globalization, the rate of change is only going to accelerate. So with your permission, Reverend Al, let me lay out where I would hope we would be fighting. Because as Kamala said, fights like this, if the time is right, the fight is right.
That's right.
Number one, in a world where we're not going to work for the same job for 35 years, in a world where our children, for the most part, don't work one job, but work 2 or 3 at once. They may be working as an IT consultant, driving Uber, and renting out their apartment Airbnb. Matter of fact, in America in 2018, and this started in the 90s as companies started to outsource jobs, not just to abroad, but if you were the janitor, if you were the housekeeper, you didn't work for Apple, you worked for a subcontractor. Today in America in 2018, 1/3 of Americans work in some level of contingent work. They're either part-time, they're independent contractors, they're gig workers. And the enormous thing about that third of the workforce, they may be doing okay until the stuff hits the fan. And they have no social safety net. The social contract that was created in the 20th century between business, labor, and government has broken down. As 21st century progressives, we ought to be creating a portable benefit system that says no matter what kind of job you have, no matter whether you are independent contractor, gig worker, or on your own, as you work, you ought to collect some benefits, and those benefits ought to travel with you as you move from one job to another. So if you are at that 45-year-old age and you suddenly have a break, you've got something to fall back on. We need a social contract that meets the workforce where it's at in the 21st century. The second thing we need to look at. You know, every business leader, everybody has this truism. You know, our biggest asset is our people. My biggest asset, they leave the door at night when the workers go home. But you know what? In our tax code, in our accounting system, We give no credit to human capital. There was legislation created about 25 years ago called the R&D tax credit. It said we ought to promote research and development. That's a good thing. And if you make an investment as a company in something that qualifies as research and development, you not only get to deduct that, but you get a tax credit. So if you're a company and you go out and spend $1,000 on buying a new computer, you will get a tax credit, an R&D tax credit, and you will also be able to put that computer, in a sense, you call it an asset, you put it on your balance sheet, you get credit for it. If you spend that same $1,000 investing in a human being, you get nothing. It's a cost, it's a liability. Well, if we believe that investment in human capital is important, and I've got bipartisan legislation to do this, we ought to create the equivalent of an R&D tax credit for human growth. We ought to have a human being R&D tax credit. So if you invest $1,000 in training somebody, upskilling them, that company ought to get a tax break. You ought to have to record how much you're investing in human capital. And shouldn't we at least have a system from tax and accounting that values people as much as we value machines and other pieces of equipment? That is where our future lies. We ought to recognize as well, no matter how much education you have, if you're not able to continue to upskill throughout your career, your chances of staying engaged, staying involved, having that fair shot is going to disappear. So again, we've created legislation that says we ought to have a lifelong learning account. The government would help out, chipping in some too, so that you could accumulate money along the way. So if you have that bump, you have the resources to actually get those skills that you need to stay in a job market. We ought to also recognize, I stand before you as somebody who's been extraordinarily blessed to do well in this system. But something is wrong, or something is different in America, where in 2018, if you look back 40 years ago, the average amount of time somebody held on to a public stock was 8 years. The amount of time somebody holds on to a public stock today is 2 months. The great American companies that were created post-World War II could not be created today because the urge for short-term profits over long-term value undermines the ability to kind of create those great enterprises. So we ought to have a tax code in the system that doesn't say simply go for that next 2 cents next quarter to show profits and at the same time lay off investing in human beings. We ought to have a system that rewards long-term value creation. You want to do tax reform? Fine. Let's incent tax reform for long-term value hold. You want a capital gain? Fine. Let's make it based upon a 5-year hold. You got pension funds? Fine. You ought to make sure that the people who manage those pension funds don't get compensated just on how well they do the next quarter, but how much value they're creating over the long haul. We ought to recognize that unless we make free enterprise or capitalism, whatever you want to call it, work for all people, people's faith in the system is going to continue to dissipate. So we need a new economic model. We need a model that recognizes people are going to move from jobs to job, that they still need security. We need to do more than pay lip service to our investment in human beings and have a tax code and an accounting system where companies have to report how much money they spend on human beings. And we need a business environment that says you have an obligation not only to your shareholders, but to your stakeholders, your employees, the community you live in. Unless we can make a system where everybody gets that opportunity to earn a good life, then this country, which we have all been blessed to live in, is not going to reach its potential. I'll close with this. I know, and this is why I so appreciate what Reverend Al does year in and year out. I know, and I know this is a different kind of crowd here because you are activists, but for many Americans, they turn on the TV and the news comes on, particularly if it's with Reverend's good friend Donald Trump comes up. I know that most people's normal reaction is you want to throw a shoe at the TV. I feel the same way, and I'm inside the TV. But we cannot lose faith. We cannot lose heart. As Kamala mentioned, Tuesday night, we did great in Virginia. I was really sad, though, to see some of my good friends in the Senate lose their positions. But we have to stay engaged. If America voted, if young people voted in their numbers, if people of color voted in their numbers, up here where I work would look a heck of a lot different. So, Reverend Al, I thank you for what you do, continue to do. Thank you for helping me way back when I was just a young startup with Doug Wilder. But we all got to stay in this fight because we do live in a great country. But that greatness doesn't need to be made again. It is who and what we are. But that greatness can only be maintained if we have a system that gives every American that fair shot, that opportunity to earn. So thank you all very much. Stay engaged, stay in the fight.